Click subscribe to get daily Manchester United content from Passionate Reds, only on All for United.
But anyway, Donny Van De Beek, chaps, can this be a season to shine? And more importantly, what does he have to do to get into this United side to cement his place? Stuart, I'll come to you first, mate. What does he have to do to cement his place in this United side? What does he have to do to prove to Ollie that he can play in midfield for Manchester United week in, week out?
Well, I love DVB, as you all know. I'm a big fan of his. I thought he was great at Ajax, and I'm disappointed in his transition between Ajax and Manchester United. I understand his issues. You know, Ajax, although Eredivisie finished, I think it was in February or March, so he didn't kick a ball for almost 4 or 5 months, and that, you know, for a professional football, that is a bit of an issue. I think by his own high standards, and I think if he took a look at himself, would probably admit he didn't really do much for us last season, which is a real shame because there's such a talent in there. But his attitude and his willingness to work hard seems to have paid off over the summer. He's bulked up quite a bit considering where he was, and I think he'll be a huge asset for us in the coming season. I've always felt, and I watched a lot of Ajax anyway, because the Ajax team of a couple of years ago was dynamic. It was brilliant. They were young, they were fresh, they were hungry. And Donny played in a couple of positions in central midfield. And I just think that Ollie needs to utilise that aspect of his game a lot more. And I will go so far as to say as he could, in some games, be quite pivotal in a holding role for us, which mean he could play alongside Pogba and Bruno. And then we could have that dynamic front three that we all crave, of maybe Sancho, Cavani when he's back, and Rashford or Martial, or a number of different options that Ollie's got. If you've seen Donny play and you understand his intelligence of a player, that's what will enable him to play as a six. It's all about up here. It's all about intelligence. He can tackle. He's relatively tall, and he can win ball in the air. He's probably, he would never dominate in the air, of course, but he can win ball in the air. But what he does crucially and what he does critically for a holding player, he will get it. He won't lose it, and he'll be able to utilise it better than any of the three that we've got.
Charlie, I'll come to you next, pal. Does Donny possess the right skill set to be a regular starter week in, week out in the Premier League? Do you think he has the quickness of thought to play there? Because obviously the Premier League is a lot different to the Eredivisie. You know, it's quick thinking, it's quick play. The speed is 100 times quicker than the Eredivisie. Do you think he possesses the right skill set to be a weekly starter in the Premier League?
Yeah, definitely. I think, again, he's one that's been underused. There's a lot of players that I think have been underused in our squad. And I think a main sort of criticism of Ollie, even by people who support Ollie, has been that he hasn't been used his squad well enough, particularly last season. And obviously when we had games where Donny could have come on, look at the Europa League final, Ollie didn't twist. He just stuck with what he had. And God knows what would have happened if he would have made an attacking change and brought Donny on. But yeah, he's one of my most favourite players. I think the key difference between him and Matic and Fred and McTominay is the way they look after the football. Fred and McTominay sort of use it as a hot potato, and when they get it, they seem to want to get rid of it straight away. They seem a bit frightened. They seem as if it's their enemy almost. And Matic and Van De Beek see the ball as their friend. They want to look after it. They care for it. And that's the key difference. I think Matic and Van De Beek I think they always not always simple, but they always want to look after the football, and I think that's the key difference between those two and Fred and McTominay. Although Matic does provide more progressive passes that are more high risk at times, he's still a lot of those are accurate. But it's not just that; it's his intelligence. He can arrive late in the box. He's scored a lot of goals doing that for Ajax. As Stu rightly said, he's very tenacious actually, and bulking up will help him with that. I think I was obviously at Old Trafford for the Everton game. 3 or 4 times I remember Donny sliding in for a tackle. Very tenacious. He's not scared of doing that.
It was only his second pre-season game. He did very well. I mean, like last season, I just think he came into some games and he was like a step behind everybody else. It was like he was like watching on. He just couldn't get to grips with anything. So, and I think against Everton, when he was starting alongside Matic and Fernandes, that midfield looked well balanced. And I think for Van de Beek to be a success is find a way for him to play alongside Fernandes rather than replace Fernandes. It's playing too well. Instead of Van de Beek can play to Fernandes' strengths by picking out like the dangerous areas, and becoming a threat in the opposition penalty box with Fernandes supplying the passes. And for this to work, you need a good defensive midfielder, and Matic was the perfect partner for that on that day. So, and one of his, I think, Van de Beek's key strengths is when he gets the ball, he's willing to pass the ball forward, which it just reminds me of Michael Carrick when he used it. He was like, "Oh, I'm looking forward. I want to get United on the attack." Whereas Scott McTominay is not quite as good as getting, looking forward. So I think, like Charlie said, I think he's got a good opportunity starting against Leeds, and his performance against Everton underlined his credentials. And another test he passed was his fitness. Other players are not so far advanced. So Pogba and Fred return late, and they're just building up their fitness. Ollie said that McTominay is carrying a slight injury, so Leeds are a tricky test, but Van de Beek will be well suited. His technical quality will make him more resistant to the pressing opponent. And it's something I read earlier. It's also worth noting that Leeds lost 4-0 to Van de Beek's former side Ajax last week, and with Van de Beek's quality in possession, it could cause them the same type of problems on their Saturday.
Henry, I'll come to you with this one. I think it's a little bit what Andrew's touched upon as well, as what Fred's saying here in the comments. Whether he plays or not, we still need a DM next to him. Until we sign one, we won't get the best out of our midfielders. Do you share that sentiment? Or do you think we could play maybe a Matic in that role, like Andrew sort of hit upon there? Or do we really need to bring this defensive sort of midfielder in to get the best out of people like your Donny Van De Beeks, your Paul Pogbas, and your Bruno Fernandes's?
I think the biggest issue has been not getting a defensive midfielder this summer, and I've been a massive advocate of getting Neves or Bissouma or someone who's able to be a little bit of a destroyer, but also very capable with long passes. I think people think short passes in defensive midfielder, they're really important, but long passes is something that Michael Carrick was one of the best at. I'd argue personally that he's one of the most underrated players the Premier League's ever seen. So, we need someone like him. But the more relaxed we are about not getting a DM makes me think this year that Donny spent on the bench and that he spent with the coaching staff and that he spent, around the training ground, not necessarily playing very much, but the longer he spent, I'm thinking, are these guys planning to put him in defensive midfield? As next to Fernandes, as people have mentioned before, he's not going to play over Bruno. He's not a good enough player, and he's not quick enough, and he's not. I wouldn't say he's risky enough personally. I just don't see him, doing things that Bruno does, and risking losing possession as much. I think he's a much more tidy player, but it's one of those where this has been a whole year of progression, and we were told the first year kind of. Don't judge him on the first year, judge him on the second year, and we'll build him into the squad and, make him feel at home in the starting 11. And part of me is just thinking, we don't necessarily need a destroyer in midfield. And my reasoning why is you look at the other top sides in the league, all of them have destroyers. They have 4 or 5 attacking players that press so high that you win the ball in the final third. and you don't need that defensive midfielder.
But Hammer doesn't think that Donny can handle a 6 by himself. Are you echoing that thoughts, or do you think Donny can handle a 6?
Well, no, I do think Donny can, and the thing is, as Henry quite rightly said, we've not seen Donny play for Manchester United in a 6. I've seen him play for Ajax in a 6, and he was very, very comfortable. But it comes back to what I was saying in my statement, that you need a competent brain, a brain who understands football, a brain that can read the game at any current part of where you are at any place on the pitch. And Donny has that ability to do it. Michael Carrick was a master on it, by the way, an absolute master on it. And Donny's got that ability to be able to sense what's going on and around him, and to utilise it in one or two ways. And that is to knock it 2 or 3 yards, or is to try and do a 20 or 30 yard, what I would call a Hollywood ball. And Donny has that ability, has that in his locker. But Charlie and the lads, all of them were absolutely right in that Donny's a very calming influence on the pitch as well. So when he'll get the ball, he'll receive it in a tight area. He'll receive it with players around him, but he'll never panic. He'll just take it, he'll look, and he'll move it. And that's what you need. You need somebody who has this calming influence. Even Bruno at times will get the ball and he'll be thinking way too fast for what, and he can't then deliver what he wants to do. Pogba's very much the same. Pogba will run it 2 or 3 steps too far sometimes, and will get caught in possession. Whereas Donny won't. Donny will get it and he'll utilise it better. What we don't know, because we haven't seen enough of him, is what his through balls are like, and what his penetration is like in terms of his passing ability through the middle. And Charlie made a point that Matic is very good at that. Well, we don't know, because we haven't seen enough of Donny to see if he can deliver that. I think that he can. I understand people's versions or viewpoints that the Dutch league is different to the Premier League. Absolutely, it is. It really is. And I raised a point about Varane coming over. How would he handle the pressure of the Premier League? But Donny's had 12 months now to settle in to our way of playing, the English lifestyle, and he will know enough about the Premier League to change his game slightly so that he can adapt to it.
So yeah, definitely a player that's been underused in my opinion. And Stu's right, he can play a 6. He could play a 6 role, I believe that. I think he's best in an 8 position, and he can also play a 10 position.
He is.
But I think with Bruno Fernandes fit, there is no way in a million years that he's ever going to start as a 10. So he's going to obviously be an 8 most likely. So yeah, fantastic player. I think having more intelligent footballers around him helps him. I think Rich said, and rightly so, he's got to make the most of his chances. But last season he was shoved into games. No disrespect to the other players in the team, but they're alongside players who aren't as intelligent as him, not on the same wavelength as him. And if you've got Nemanja Matic next to him, Sancho on the right, Rashford, Martial on the left, Bruno, these are players, intelligent footballers, and I think it will help him a lot. So yeah.